Hello everyone, welcome to a new chess video. In this video, I'm going to show you how to punish the bishop pin on the knight and the queen. That is, the bishop pin on g5. I'm absolutely sure you come across this pin in many of your games, but from today on, you'll actually want your opponent to play this pin against you because you'll know how to punish it brutally. Normally, this pin happens in the Italian opening, although you can draw your own conclusions because it appears in many other openings, but the clearest example is in the Italian opening. For those who don't know what the Italian opening is, it's this right here, okay? These two moves, and that's it. Here, it will work for you whether you play knight to f6 first or bishop to c5, because you'll end up in the same position by transposition, okay? For example, bishop to c5. Natural moves would be castling, right? Knight to f6 and then d3. This is a completely typical position in the Italian opening. If you play knight to f6 first, it would be the same, because after knight to f6, d3 is usually played to defend the pawn, then you could continue with bishop to c5 and castling. The idea here is that before castling, we're going to play d6. If we castle, suddenly this pin becomes dangerous, okay? Remember this well, if we castle first, this pin really is dangerous. However, if we don't castle and instead, for example, play first, d6, a move we're going to make no matter what, then this move isn't as dangerous, and I'll explain why. First, we're going to push this pawn forward, because we're threatening this bishop. If it trades for the knight, we gain a huge advantage, since it would go bishop takes knight, queen takes, and the queen would be supporting the attack of this knight. And most likely, thanks to this attack, we'd end up finishing the game. In other words, it wouldn't bother us at all if, after driving away this bishop with the move h6, it captured the knight on f6. So the most common move, and the one people always play against you, is this one here, right? But now, thanks to the fact that we haven't castled, we can play g5 with a lot of strength. That is, why doesn't this work if we've already castled? Well, it's very simple. If here, instead of playing d6, we had already castled, then h6, bishop h4, g5 would be a mistake. Because this knight sacrificed for two pawns could follow with a lot of success, since now the king would be pretty exposed here, and this knight could be attacked very strongly. So the big difference, pay close attention, is that now with d6 played, this doesn't work. And I'll explain why it doesn't work. Knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes, and now they're really not threatening us with anything. On the contrary, they've sacrificed material. To help us attack, we open the file for the rook. This bishop will have to move. This rook works together with the bishop, so we'll have a completely winning position, and on top of that, we'll be up in material. If you want, you can castle long, and the position will be just as safe, but with a crushing attack and also extra material. Of course, let's see. This is very easy if they've lost, or rather if they've sacrificed the knight, but usually they're not going to sacrifice this knight. I mean here. When we play d6 and they come here, right, pinning this knight, which is what we've been looking at so far, usually after this move, it's true, they've allowed us to do this, but normally they won't capture. As you can see, that's a mistake. Normally they'll retreat. Well, here I'm going to show you Chigorin's beautiful trap. Who is Chigorin? Well, he was a very strong player who came up with this trap, and honestly, it seems like it's been forgotten. It's a beautiful trap. So what are we going to do? Well, simply, we're going to threaten to trap this bishop. This video is amazing, I promise you. Save it well, because if you study it carefully, you'll never get your knight pinned like this again. So if you like these kinds of videos, leave a big like. If we reach, pay attention, I'm going to ask for a lot, but since you all are the best in the world, maybe we'll make it. If we reach 300 likes, okay? If we get to 300 likes, I'll upload a video about how to punish the other knight pin, which is quite different, alright? But it's also dangerous. So if you like this video and we reach 300 likes, I promise to also upload the video about the other pin. Alright, we push this pawn to set up the Chigorin trap. What's the threat here? The threat is obvious, right? The threat is clear. We want to push again and trap this bishop, right? However, there's a problem with playing this pawn advance. We're hanging this pawn here. And most likely your opponent will fall for the Chigorin trap, since we're threatening this advance. They can calmly take the pawn thinking it's just a blunder, and they'll probably believe they're completely winning. Before we continue at this, if they don't fall for this trap, the game will still be comfortable for us. That is, if they try to save this bishop, the game will still be comfortable, since we have a very good position, a potential breakthrough point here, and then we could advance, open up with the rook, castle long, and bring the other rook over. So don't worry if when you play this Chigorin trap, they don't fall for it, okay? And they play something else because it's still very comfortable. However, I assure you that almost everyone who goes for the pin doesn't know all of this. I promise you. And they're going to capture this pawn for free. Why? Because on top of that, look at the huge threat they're making against the f7 square. Right? Now it looks like white has an extra pawn in a crushing attack. However, we're just going to ignore this attack and stick to our plan. h4. Come on, chess teacher, are you going a little crazy? You're threatening my bishop, but I'll go for it anyway. This move right here, they have to make it because it's already too late. It's just too late to try to save the bishop. This bishop can't go anywhere anymore. That's why they absolutely have to get into this game. They're threatening our queen and our rook. Alright, here you need to know one thing. If you move the queen away, that is, if you play queen to e7, the game becomes very comfortable for you, right? Very comfortable for you. Even if they end up capturing your rook, the position is still quite favorable for the black pieces, alright? In fact, if they take your rook, you still capture this bishop and black has the advantage. However, Chigorin's trap isn't that. Chigorin's trap isn't that. So what is Chigorin's trap? Letting the queen be taken. And you're going to be amazed because it's incredible. It's absolutely impressive. We let them take the queen. Given that so much material has already been sacrificed, white has no choice but to capture the queen, logically. And now I'm going to explain something to you. It's true that white has a lot of extra material, because they have a queen and two pawns in exchange for a bishop. It's obvious they have a huge material advantage. However, our pieces are working together perfectly. We have the rook, the bishop, the knight, the other knight, and the other bishop. And on top of that, we have a powerful pawn right here in front that will allow us to win the game in several ways. Here, I assure you that you've already won the game. The only way white can avoid checkmate is by giving up all the material they've managed to win. And on top of that, we'd still have a much stronger attack. So we've won the game, and I'll explain how, because it's not complicated at all, and in fact, it's really beautiful. We bring the bishop here. Remember, when they capture your queen, you bring the bishop to this spot. If someone didn't catch everything the first time, don't worry. The great thing about YouTube is that you can watch the video as many times as you need. There's absolutely no problem. I'm going to try to explain it so that everyone understands. We come to threaten the queen. Obviously, they could give up the queen, but that would be very bad for them, because if they give up the queen, we come in with the knight and keep attacking with all our pieces, and on top of that, we're not even down any material. That's why the usual thing is for them to move the queen away. In fact, that's the best move in this position. Once they move the queen away, what move should we make? Well, many of you are probably thinking about taking here with check. Normally, when we're down material, what do we want? We want to attack quickly to deliver checkmate. Why? Because if not, the opponent, having more material, will beat us. In this case, that's not necessary. We can even bring more material into the attack. Knight to e4 is the best move in this position. A tremendous move that brings the missing piece into the attack. Now, what's the threat? You might be wondering. Well, simply, if white ignores everything and, for example, tries to move this knight to avoid losing it and threatens the rook, just to name a move, right? If they don't address the threat, we simply go knight to e2, check, and when the king moves, checkmate. Easy. That is, here, when we give this check, the only thing they can do is give up the queen, right? So no matter what, they have to be careful with this move and respond to the threat. And here, they have several moves to deal with the threat. First of all, what happens if they capture the pawn? Because it's clear that this pawn is causing quite a bit of trouble here. What happens if they capture it with the h-pawn? Well, don't worry, because this is very simple. We play knight to f3 check, and really the king can't move because the rook controls the file, so they have to capture it. And then we would simply play bishop takes f3, and no matter how many extra moves white has, extra because now it's white's turn, there is no move that can defend against this checkmate on h1. That is, here, no matter what move white plays, we're simply going to deliver checkmate on the next move. So in conclusion, they can't take this pawn, you see. They can't take this pawn with the h-pawn because then comes knight to f3 checkmate. Do you understand? What happens if instead of capturing with the h-pawn, they try to take it with the f-pawn? So are they saved then, Chustopper? Well, no, they're not saved either, because here we could checkmate in two different ways. Knight to f3 also works, because it's a double check. They can't capture the knight because the bishop is also giving check. And when they move, we simply deliver this beautiful Arabian checkmate with the rook and the knight, you see? So they can't capture with this pawn either. We could also checkmate on e2, right? It would be the same because it's a double checkmate, and then when they move, we would play knight takes g3, checkmate, thanks to the pin from the rook. As you can see, there are so many beautiful combinations. So we've come to a conclusion. After knight to d4, they can't even escape the threat, because then what would happen? Knight to e2 would come, king to h1, and rook takes h2, checkmate. If they try to capture this pawn with the h-pawn, we've seen that knight to f3 was mate. And if they captured with the f-pawn, knight to f3 was also checkmate. And if you wanted, also knight to e2 and then knight takes g3 was also checkmate. Very well, we're seeing a lot of ways to save yourself here. If, for example, they say, well, if you're going to checkmate me here because my king is trapped, what happens if I move the rook to give the king an escape route? Well, it's very simple. Knight to f3 again. Knight to f3 is going to be one of the most popular moves of all. If you don't take the knight, let's suppose you play, for example, king to f1, I could simply play g takes h2, and on the next move, I'll checkmate you by promoting to a queen. Do you understand? I'm going to checkmate you by promoting to a queen. That's why after knight to f3, you have to take the knight. And when you take the knight, then we simply continue with bishop takes f3. And checkmate is imminent. There's no way to avoid checkmate. For example, let's suppose you play, well, if you play this, I give you a direct mate, right? If you play, for example, pawn takes pawn, you can't. And if you play anything else, well, first I'll take here with the rook, and checkmate will be unstoppable. So another conclusion we've reached is that it also doesn't work when we play knight to d4, to move the rook away, to try to escape with the king, because I'm going to checkmate you no matter what again. So what happens if they play, for example, knight to c3? Very logical, because that way you cover the knight e2 square. We've seen that if you played an unimportant move, I'd go knight to f2, right? And then after king to h1, the mate would simply follow. However, if I play knight to c3, knight to e2 is no longer possible because I would simply capture it. How should I continue, chess teacher, if they play knight to c3? Well, it's very interesting and at the same time quite logical. Knight to f3, like most ideas, we play knight to f3. Thanks to the tremendous attack we have, if they do not take that knight, we simply deliver mate. Right? If they don't take this knight, we simply deliver mate. I know it's a lot of information, huh? But I repeat, you can watch the video as many times as you need. I'm gonna try to explain everything in a relatively short amount of time so that everyone can spend as much time as they need. I don't want to make this video an hour and a half long, you know? So, I mean, if they don't take the knight, it's me. If they do take the knight, which is necessary to avoid mate, then how would it continue? Well, just like before, bishop takes on f3. And as you can see, the mate is unstoppable. They can't capture here because it would be mate, and they can't capture here because it's pin. And against any other move, I'm going to end up delivering mate. For example, right now, I'm threatening to checkmate with the pawn on the next move. That is, against practically any move, it's checkmate with the pawn. As you can see, it's a brutal way to punish the bishop pin. I really hope you all loved it. If you like these kinds of videos, I put a lot of effort into them and deliver them to you almost daily for free, so leave me a big like. And if we reach 300 likes, which would make me really happy, then I'll show you how to punish the other pen. I hope you loved it. Let me know in the comments. Let me know what you think, and as always, friends, we'll see each other tomorrow with another new video. Bye, friends!